I can remember the night that the Blitz was in Belfast, and the foreman came down to my father and he says, "There's something terrible in Belfast." He says, "The sky's lit up as bright as day." And of course, I was anxious to see what was going on too. And my father and that foreman walked to the top of the quarry there, and I was with them. And the sky was just ablaze, just ablaze. And that was the first raid. There was 2 raids, you know. I don't know how there weren't that big a space between them, you know. But
2 raids in the one evening?
No, 2 raids at different times,
Yeah.
in one and then
Yeah.
maybe in a fortnight.
Yeah.
But the story was that there was a boat in Belfast that put up a smoke screen, and that sort of blanked out a good bit of Belfast, and it didn't get destroyed. But I can remember being up in Belfast. These boys that kept the tractors here was needing some spares from J.E. Coulter's, and they were going up in the car to get them. And of course I was a boy and I was with them. And I can see the heaps of rubble, streets of houses, just in a pile, you know. And I wondered how on earth, how many people were killed, or what on earth took place. I used to go up there, you know, when those boys were at their tea at dinner time, and I'd be hanging about the hut, you know. I could hear men saying, "Look, if this retreat doesn't stop, the Germans will be here in 2 weeks." I can remember that. And mind you, that was frightening. That was frightening. But then Field Marshal Montgomery went out and he put a stop to the retreat.
Well, on the night of the Blitz, my father was lying in the hospital bed, and all he could see was patients coming in with limbs missing, and the blood lying running below the beds like a river. And that's what he told me, and that's many years ago.
And he would have been sent home?
Oh, aye, he was sent home because they needed the beds badly.
The raid that I remember most was on a Easter Tuesday night, about around 9, half 9. The planes arrived up over Strangford and over Belfast Loch, and they peppered the country with incendiary bombs, so that bombers would see where to empty the bombs into in Belfast and the surrounding area. And the gas mains, whenever were blew up, they went on fire, and that added to the problems of the peasants trying to get out of the streets of Belfast. But a lot of people lost their lives that night. Just the one farm that was badly burned, the hay sheds and so on, the one up on the hill belonged to a man called John Anderson, and they got incendiary and was badly burned out. And there was an aircraft carrier in Belfast. She gave them quite a hot reception. I think it was called the Furious. But anyway, we had distant relatives was killed in Belfast, in Thorndyke Street in Belfast, and the flares out of the German planes was lit up our farmyard on the Ballybarns Road. Some were in bed and some weren't, but as soon as the siren went off, and here in Newton Ards and Belfast and all around Cumber and so on, the sirens, my dad got us all rounded up, on the mum and dad and 4 boys, And my father was an ex-soldier of the First World War, so he got us all out of the house and down across the field into the glen. And whenever the all clear went, we go back up out of the glen and into the house, because we were a sitting duck. But it was a great thing going round then where the bombs had been. They gathered up this huge big lumps of shrapnel, but whenever the bomb went off, it was meant to blow itself apart, and this red hot lumps of about a foot long with sharp edges on it, the way it was made, to kill all round it. And over on the Bangor Road at the place, after you go from Bangor heading for Belfast, after you pass the Ballyrobert station, you come into a bad left-hand bend. It was called the Devil's Elbow. On the bend there was a lane going up. It was known as Anderson's Lane, and the incendiary bombed it, and the machine gunned that man and his sister, but they escaped. And there were some of the cows had incendiary bombs went down into them. These were the ones that set everything on fire. Yeah. But it wasn't a pleasant place to be. But houses, people losing their relatives and losing their homes and only had what clothes they stood up in. It's two different worlds from the lap of luxury Ireland is enjoying at the present. One airplane bomber who had saw this going on in Belfast, as they came up the Strangford Loch, and they turned her round and they emptied out 5 bombs on the top of the hill up here. And so I don't know what was his thinking of.
Was that on his way back home?
He swung her back home then,
yeah.
And we waited for the other boys and the other pilots to take their after they had emptied their bombs out in Belfast. On an out farm of ours, there was 3 bombs, but apart from that, there was 1 or 2 in the forest up here behind the quarry, and there were people come out from the city and were sleeping in any building the farmer could let them in through the door. They were glad they only had what they stood up in 1940. And then there was a wee tin shed up the road here, and there was 1 or 2 sides on it, and it was used for keeping the hay in. And as you go over Craigauntlet and heading for Belfast on the Belmont Road, a lot of people called Johnson came out of Belfast, a family or 2, and lived in it. And then they gathered up more tin to fence it around inside for to sleep in. And from that day to this, it's known as Tin Town. That petrol station there after Craigauntlet that you're going down into Belfast. People, there was hair straw and they were glad to a roof over their head. The government also had a quotation. You had to plough a third or whatever of your land every year to boost the grain production for wheat and barley and corn. But the ready-made hen meal was whatever you had to fill in a quota of how many hens you had, and the hens were quoted 1/8 of an ounce of hen meal per hen per day. Well, then you could have boosted it with corn or whatever you had else that the hen would eat. Rations was very tight on cows, pigs and hens, because they all had to come on boats from foreign countries, and they were getting sunk every day. Hundreds of boats lost in the war, were oil tankers and boats, meal boats and coal. But we survived, and we're very thankful we weren't in Europe. We're overrun by Germans. There was very short distance between France and London. If Hitler had come on over into Britain.
Well, the story I'm going to tell you is about the boys on their way back, the Germans on their way back from Belfast. Were getting rid of a few bombs, mostly incendiary bombs, but apparently there was one that wasn't an incendiary, and it dropped just over my shoulder where I'm talking here, between here and Ballyblack Church, down in the hollow of that field, and it had the effect of blowing all the windows out of the church. Now, our farmhouse in those days was actually further in front of me in the old farmyard, and I think we got a couple of windows broken. But we were all, well, I wasn't born then, but they were hiding below the dining room table. But there was no real damage done here. And I know the story goes that people travelling in and out of Newtownards for many years after that said Ballyblack was a church with no windows, and it got that sort of nickname. We're actually standing in the townland of Lochrees, but Ballyblack just starts at the bottom of the lane up to the church. As you can see, it's a very beautiful church, and it must have been heartbreaking for the congregation. I can just think, I don't know for sure were there any stained glass or memorial windows in it that people had donated previous to that, but it must have been very heartbreaking for the congregation. But like everyone else during those hard times, they got together and it's still going strong.
I'm going back here to my very early childhood. I was 3 when the bombs were flying around Newtownards one night in April, and I can remember the fellow that worked to my father on the farm coming into the house and gathering me up in an eider-down and taking me out of the house, and we gathered up on the main road away from the house. And the next day, when the planes stopped flying and the bombs stopped landing, we went back to bed again. But the next day, when my father and some of the men went down the yard, they found this, what seems to be a detonator of one of the bombs, because one of the bombs landed in a field, or a field 3 fields from our farmhouse, and this was supposed to be off that bomb. And also in our stackyard, which was only 50 yards from the main dwelling, there was what people described as a bomb carrier. It was a big length of metal sheeting about 6 feet or 7 feet long, and it lay there for years. I can remember it vividly, and it rotted away there because it was no good for anything, and people weren't interested in those things then. But that was my memory of the night of the air raid that they talked about. And I can also remember some other things about the war. I had just started at Lochrees School. That was a school about half a mile down the road, and everything was going nicely. We went home on Friday afternoon and off on Saturday and off on Sunday. And when we came back down to the school, it was all changed, because round the school at that time there was a set of railings about 6 feet high to keep children from jumping out onto the main road, and they were cut down. And when we went into the school, the first thing we asked the teacher, where are the railings going? What are they? Where have they disappeared to over the weekend? And we were told that they needed the metal for the war effort. Well, we didn't know what the war effort was, but that was the railings disappearing, and those would be my main memories of a 3-year-old child at that time, as clearly as I can remember it. Another wee bit that I remember was when the war was coming to an end. There was talk of it for 2 or 3 days, so the teacher told us that the war would be ended before Monday over the weekend. Officially it was supposed to stop, and we were told that if the news came out that the war was stopped, we weren't to come back to school on Monday. So as true to what she was hoping it would happen, the war stopped and we didn't go to school on Monday. Well, then sometime after that we had a celebration, and the celebration was a bonfire in what we called the half acre. That was the playground at Lochrays, and that was the first time that I remember seeing fireworks. There were fireworks, I don't know where they came from, but anyway, there were fireworks let off, and there were sweets and lemonade, and we had a good party there. Now, another thing I remember, there was an air raid shelter in the playground in the school, and every so often we would have been marched out for air raid drill, as they called it, and we were marched out into this big concrete air raid shelter. About every few weeks we went out there, so that if there was an invasion when we were in the classroom, we knew what to do. So we went out there, and then I remember too, after that the air raid shelter was demolished to make more room for the children to play. So those are some of my thoughts.